Otherwise, if they just ask some people or some senior manager to in charge this type of project, it is not enough. They are not. What they can just establish is just the minimum system, so as to comply with the minimum requirement of the listing rule. But that is not really a corporate governance system. They need to participate more.
The characters of being an executive and also a non-executive directors are a bit different. Being an executive director, certainly you are part of the management team, and therefore while you're sitting in driving seats, you have to evaluate the pros and cons between business opportunities and also business risk. You have to justify your decision, and then you have to present your case to the board, which comprises both executive and also non-executive directors. Being an executive director, therefore, my role is more on how to drive the companies towards the set direction, how to achieve the company's goal, and then compare and contrast what we have been achieving with our, for example, the key performance indicators. So therefore, being an executive director, as I understand it, my role is more an achiever and also pace setter. As a non-executive director, I would say the angle is a bit different. While sitting in the other side of the table, my role will be more on the monitoring role and also advisory role, advising the company with regard to different sets of market practices or the governance systems available, so that the company can, based on its own merits, decide to choose whatever governance systems that they believe should be to the best interest of the shareholder and also the company.
Well, I think the difference between an executive and a non-executive role is very dramatic. In an executive role, you have the power to issue instructions throughout the company within the sphere of responsibility that each individual director has. He is supposed to be able to create information flows which tell him what's going on within the company, and can alter things and change things for that to occur. The non-executive director is in a rather difficult position. I mean, he is dependent for his information flow on the management of the company. And therefore, I think the independent director very often finds himself contemplating what is likely to be the quality of the information which he is receiving. What is the likely quality of the decisions being made by management on behalf of the company? I mean, so he is somewhat more detached in his in discharging his responsibility. Personally, I believe that it's a very good thing to have a number of executive directors on a board, because the non-executive directors can listen to different opinions, and they should listen to different opinions. And the worst situation could be, which is often found in America, I strangely find, is that there is really only one link between executive management and the board, and that's the chief executive. I think just to have that one window on the operations of a company is very dangerous.
In many ways, I feel the corporate governance have now gone to the side of preventing problems rather than helping the company grow. A more positive attitude is now a negative connotation. You know, you want to have more outside directors, you want to have more independent non-executive directors, and you want all the committees, the proper committees, to be chaired by these people, really to prevent so-called problems. But ultimately, if you have the wrong person there, you're not going to, it's not going to have the effect it's intended to. And that's why, in America, it's more by regulation. In Hong Kong, fortunately, I think we're still at a point where we haven't overdone it. But I think the tendency, at least the sort of so-called worldwide practice, I wouldn't call it best practice, worldwide practice tend to push it more to the regulatory side, and the negative side rather than the positive side of corporate governance. Most experienced business people who have experience in other businesses, other disciplines, would obviously bring what they have learned in the other businesses to the businesses where they're acting as an independent board member. And I think that's really what the companies that invite you to be an independent board director is looking for as well, what you bring to the table. I think the board would then have to, using its best judgment from the experiences gained elsewhere as to how much of that is then made transparent to shareholders, and in fact, for that matter, to staff and suppliers and other customers.
I think the introduction of the independent non-executive director, this would be something quite, to me, I think it really helps because in the past, when it is first introduced, you can see that a lot of listed companies, they just, the chairman just bring their friends or some bankers, lawyers' friends to the boardroom, and then all these are close friends, so nothing unusual will be heard or will be discussed. But these 2 years, because of the requirement that the emphasis on the independence, really you can see that now in the market, the listed company, they are willing to pay. They are willing to pay really a reasonable sum of money and to engage the professionals who are willing to take up the role. I would say this is an important move to help in enhancing the corporate governance in Hong Kong. I think really the emphasis should be really for anybody who take up the role of a director, really you must spend the time and effort on it. And then the shareholder should be able to see from, say, what sort of committee he participates.
In recent years, the role of media in promoting good corporate governance is becoming increasingly important. Social disapproval, often expressed through the media, can not only affect the attitudes of the general public, but also regulators on how companies should behave in a socially acceptable manner. We asked our guests about their perceptions of the media's perspectives on corporate governance. Did the media know what they were talking about? Were they informed, critical observers? Were they sensationalists? Were they consistent? Were they representing corporate governance issues fairly? Here's what our guests have to say.
The media is always talk about more emotional stuff sometimes, rather than on a very rational way to analyze what corporate governance is about. So the time when they talk about corporate governance, mostly is when scandals happened. That might not be the best way to talk about a new and very important issue. But I think over the last 2 or 3 years, because of the changes in regulations elsewhere in the world, Sarbanes-Oxley in the US, as I mentioned, the Appendix 14 in the case in Hong Kong listing rules changes, and there are certain rules have changed inside China, the Asian and the B-share market as well. And because of the previous all these scandals, the media does have a lot of tension on this, and also that a lot of the minority shareholders have been much more vocal, and they are activists as well. So I think over the last few years, we did hear a lot more from the media talk about corporate governance, and I think one way or another is a good thing to happen.
Yes, the media can play a similar role that they play in society in general, in being watchdogs, in being exercising their powers of free speech to criticise the government, for example, when governments do strange things. Equally, they can do that with listed companies.